50 says she's dirty. 100 if she runs. The words crackled through the squad car like gunfire, followed by a low, mean chuckle. Officer Brad Coleman leaned forward in his seat, eyes fixed on the black SUV gliding down the avenue, its polished surface catching the glow of the streetlights. Beside him, Sergeant Tom Willis smirked, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping the dash like he was placing his bet. "Look at that ride," Tom said, voice dripping with contempt. "Tell me she didn't steal it." They didn't see Maya Lewis as a person. She was a game, a mark, something to pass the time on a slow night, and she didn't even know it yet. Maya was headed home, tired after a long day. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that should have felt safe. But behind her, two men played judge, jury, and executioner from the safety of their patrol car. The lights flashed, the siren wailed. Maya's heart sank not from guilt, but from the sick certainty of what came next. She pulled over, hands steady on the wheel, pulse racing beneath her calm. Brad approached first, his grin wide, predatory. "Evening, ma'am. License and registration." Maya kept her voice level. "Of course, officer. May I ask why I was stopped?" Tom sauntered up on the passenger side, eyes scanning the interior like he owned it. "You fit the description," he said. No description given, no crime reported. Just words to justify what they'd already decided to do. Maya handed over her papers, watched Brad glance at them, not reading, not caring. Tom nodded at Brad, like calling a play. Brad leaned in close, breath heavy with smugness. "We got a report of a hit and run. Black SUV, looks a lot like yours. Think we better have you step out." "A hit and run," Maya repeated. "That's not true. There's no damage on this car." Brad shrugged. "Witness said it was you." "That's enough for me." Maya felt the weight of it, then the trap snapping shut, the game turning serious. She spoke slowly, deliberately. "I'm Special Agent Maya Lewis, FBI. You're making a serious mistake." But the words didn't reach them. Or maybe they did, and that was the point. Brad yanked open the door, grabbed her arm. Tom was already pulling out the cuffs. "Bets off," Tom muttered. "She's ours now." Metal clamped around her wrists, cold and final. Maya didn't resist. She knew how fast resistance could be twisted into justification, but her eyes burned with fury, locked on theirs. "You're going to regret this," she said, voice low but clear. They didn't flinch. They didn't care. Tom radioed it in, voice casual like ordering coffee. "Got one in custody. Suspect fled a scene, resisted stop. Bringing her in." Maya sat in the back of the cruiser, the city lights blurring past, each flash a reminder of the injustice unfolding. She thought of the badge in her pocket, the oath she'd taken, the system she'd believed in, and she wondered how many others had sat where she sat, with no badge to shield them, no rank to call upon. The station loomed ahead, a fortress of false authority, and inside, worse waited. The lies they'd write, the files they'd fake, the danger they'd think they could bury. But this time, the game was about to change. The station smelled of stale coffee and cold concrete, the kind of place where stories got rewritten, where wrong turned into right with the stroke of a pen. Tom and Brad strutted through the doors like heroes returning from battle. Maya followed, wrists bruised from the cuffs, head high despite the burn of injustice. Behind the front desk, a rookie officer glanced up. His eyes flicked from Maya to the smirking faces of his colleagues. "What's this?" he asked, hesitating. "Hit-and-run suspect," Tom said, tossing the paperwork onto the counter like a winning ticket. "Resisted stop, gave us attitude. You know the type." Maya's voice cut through the room, steady and sharp. "There was no hit-and-run, no damage to my car, no fleeing. You're manufacturing a crime." Brad snorted. "Save it for the judge, lady, or your lawyer if you can afford one." That line drew a few quiet chuckles from the other officers lingering nearby, but not everyone laughed. In the corner, Officer Ryan Moore, new to the force, shifted uncomfortably. He watched the scene unfold, something in his gut turning cold. Maya's gaze found him, not pleading, just steady. A silent question. "Will you let this happen?" But Ryan looked away. Tom gave the order. "Book her, General Holding." "General," the desk officer repeated, eyebrows raised. "She's got no priors." Tom's glare shut him up. "Do it." They marched Maya down the hall, past cells, crowded with men who had already sized her up. A black woman in business clothes, cuffed like a criminal. To them, the details didn't matter. All they saw was someone who'd fallen into the machine. Same as them, they shoved her into a holding cell meant for 6 but packed with 10. The door slammed shut. Maya stood against the wall, breathing slow, steady. Every instinct told her to fight, to shout, to demand justice. But she knew better. Here, now, those would be used against her. Outside, Brad filed his report. Each lie another brick in their story. Suspect matched description. Vehicle damage visible. Suspect became aggressive. Refused lawful commands. Tom watched over his shoulder, nodding approval. Good work. Clean, by the book. Bet we're on the news by morning. Brad grinned. 2 badasses taking down a runner. But across town, something else was already in motion. Rachel Kim, Maya's direct supervisor, stared at her phone, frown deepening. Maya hadn't checked in. Not like her. Not on a night like this. Rachel pulled up the agency tracking system, checked the license plate on Maya's SUV, and froze. Arrested hit and run. That couldn't be right. Rachel didn't waste time. She called the station directly. The voice that answered was too casual, too smug. This is Supervisory Agent Rachel Kim, FBI. I'm inquiring about the status of Special Agent Maya Lewis. I understand she's been detained. I need to speak to whoever is in charge now. The mood at the station shifted the instant Rachel's title hit the air. The desk officer paled. He put her on hold, sprinted to find Tom Dot in the holding cell. Maya felt it changed too. The tension, the weight of eyes that no longer looked at her like prey, but like a problem they didn't know how to solve. Tom took the call. His voice, so full of bravado minutes before, softened. Yes, ma'am. A small mix-up, nothing serious. We'll release her immediately. He hung up, wiped his hand across his mouth, and turned to Brad. We're in deep shit. Brad's grin faltered. She said, FBI. Tom didn't answer. He didn't have to. They opened the cell, the clink of keys loud in the sudden silence. Maya stepped out, posture perfect, eyes locked on Tom. No apology, she asked. Tom swallowed hard. Just a misunderstanding. Agent Lewis, you understand how these things happen. Busy night. Reports flying in. We're all on the same side. Here, Maya stared him down. You bet on me. You laughed at me. You built a lie because you thought no one would call you on it. You don't deserve that badge. Brad opened his mouth, then closed it. For once, he had nothing to say. But the damage was done. Outside, a crowd had gathered. The video shot by a bystander, the stop, the taunts, the cuffs was already online. View counts climbing by the second. Maya stepped into the night, the air cool against her face, free but not free. The city watched, the country would watch, and this time, the truth was louder than any report they could write. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the world was already awake. The video of Maya Lewis's arrest had exploded overnight. Millions had watched it. A black woman in a sharp suit, calm and respectful, dragged from her car, cuffed like a felon, while 2 officers grinned like hunters showing off a prize. No damage on the vehicle, no evidence of a hit and run, just their word against hers until the camera caught everything. At first, Tom and Brad tried to act like nothing had changed. They showed up for their shift, nodded at colleagues, wore their uniforms like armor, but the looks had changed. The station was no longer a fortress. It was a fishbowl. Every move watched, judged. The rookie, Ryan Moore, kept his distance. Other officers whispered when they thought no one could hear. Brad tried to laugh it off. People forget in a week. Just another internet outrage. But Tom wasn't so sure. The phones wouldn't stop ringing. The mayor's office wanted answers. The chief wanted explanations. The FBI wanted a meeting now, and outside, the real shift had begun. Protesters gathered at the station steps before dawn. No chants at first, just silence. Signs that read, "We saw it. Who's next?" Badges aren't shields. By noon, the crowd stretched down the block. Reporters arrived, cameras rolling, asking questions Tom didn't want to answer. Maya didn't speak to the press. She didn't have to. The video spoke for her. The quiet fury in her eyes as they cuffed her. The dignity she held onto when they shoved her into the cruiser. The final shot, the undamaged SUV glinting in the streetlights. But inside the station, Tom and Brad weren't thinking about Maya's dignity. They were thinking about survival. Delete the body cam footage, Brad said, voice low, sweating beneath his collar. If we can just say the cams, glitched. Tom hesitated. He knew it was too late. The internet had them, but panic made fools of men. Meanwhile, Rachel Kim arrived at City Hall. She didn't smile. She didn't posture. She laid out the facts, clear and devastating. Your officers fabricated charges. They detained a federal agent without cause. They placed her in physical danger. And they tried to cover it up. The chief tried to deflect. It was an error. They had incomplete information. Rachel's gaze could have cut stone. They had all the information they needed. They had her license, her registration, her ID. What they didn't have was respect. By late afternoon, the tide had fully turned. News networks led with the story. Civil rights groups called for suspensions, firings, indictments. A national figure tweeted, "If this can happen to an FBI agent, imagine what happens to those without a badge." Tom and Brad's world got smaller by the hour. Internal Affairs arrived with questions. Lawyers showed up unannounced. And that night, someone leaked the full body cam footage. It showed what the bystanders' video didn't. The moment Brad and Tom made their bet, their laughter as they planned the stop, the casual cruelty in every word, the footage erased their last defense. Brad stared at his phone screen in disbelief, watching himself become the villain on every feed. "This can't be happening," he muttered. Tom sank into a chair, head in his hands. He knew it was over. The power they'd abused had turned on them. The system they thought would protect them was protecting itself now, and they were expendable. Maya watched it all unfold from a distance. She stayed out of the spotlight, choosing action over soundbites. She met quietly with legal teams, helped draft policy proposals, started work on a task force for oversight reform. But in private, the weight pressed on her. She had survived, but the cost was high. The memory of the cuffs, the looks, the lies they stayed. The shift wasn't just about two officers. It was about every person who'd watched that video and felt seen. About every person who'd been silenced before, but found their voice now. The ground had moved. The old rules had cracked. And the men who thought they were untouchable learned what it felt like to fall. By the next morning, the city wasn't just watching, it was demanding. What started as a video of two officers betting on a black woman's humiliation had become a mirror no one could look away from. The signs outside the station grew bolder. Not just two bad apples. The whole tree is rotten. And it wasn't just activists anymore. Business leaders, faith groups, students, they all joined. They didn't just want Brad and Tom suspended. They wanted the system that made Brad and Tom possible to answer for itself. At City Hall, the mayor called an emergency press conference. The cameras clicked. The microphones waited. He cleared his throat, trying to find words that wouldn't make things worse. "We are deeply troubled," he began. But the crowd outside roared over him. "We want justice. We want reform." Inside the station, the mood was poison. Some officers packed up personal items, worried their names would be next. Others grumbled that Brad and Tom had made everyone look bad. A few muttered that the department should have backed them harder, but no one said it loud. The world was listening. Internal Affairs didn't stop at Brad and Tom. They opened files. They pulled reports. They found other stops that didn't add up, complaints that had been quietly shelved, footage that should have been reviewed but never was. The pattern wasn't hard to see anymore. The shield of silence was cracking. Brad tried to spin it one last time. He gave an off-camera interview to a friendly reporter. "We were doing our job. We had to act fast. The streets are dangerous. Mistakes happen." But the leaked body cam told a different story. No urgency, no confusion. Just two men making a sport of their power. Tom didn't bother defending himself. He stayed home, blinds drawn, phone off. He knew. Maya watched it all quietly. She didn't need to speak. Every new headline, every call for change, every official forced to face the truth, that was her voice now. But she worked behind the scenes, too. She sat with city attorneys, helped craft policy drafts, bodycam footage to be stored independently, civilian review boards with real power, mandatory bias training with teeth. At the same time, allies within, law enforcement began to speak up. Officer Ryan Moore, the rookie who'd looked away that night, requested a transfer to Internal Affairs. In a written statement, he admitted his failure to act and pledged to help root out misconduct. His courage sparked more confessions. Retired officers shared old stories of pressure to stay silent. A captain admitted he'd buried complaints to protect careers. The protests didn't stop. They grew smarter, more focused. Leaders published lists of demands: transparency, accountability, reform, not just words, but deadlines and metrics, and the nation kept watching. News networks ran deep dives on traffic stop data. Civil rights lawyers appeared nightly, breaking down the ways ordinary systems shielded abuse. The video of Maya's arrest became the spark for wider conversations about race, power, and the quiet cruelty hidden in plain sight. For Brad and Tom, the fall was swift. Suspension became termination. Termination became investigation. Local prosecutors opened inquiries into misconduct, filing preliminary charges for abuse of authority and filing false reports. But for Maya, victory didn't feel like celebration. It felt like a beginning. In one of her rare public statements, she said it plainly. This was never about two men. This was about a system that let them believe they'd get away with it. That's what has to change. And for the first time in a long time, people believed change might actually come. Accountability had become more than a word. It was now a demand, echoing through the city streets, its newsrooms, its boardrooms. The protests that had started as a furious response to Maya's arrest evolved into organized, unstoppable calls for reform. No longer content with apologies and promises, the people wanted action they could measure, see, and trust. City Hall was under siege not by violence, but by the steady, relentless presence of citizens who refused to leave until the old ways were torn down. Petitions flooded in, signed by tens of thousands. Business leaders, once silent, now spoke at rallies, not just to be seen, but because they knew the cost of inaction. School boards, unions, clergy all called for sweeping change. Inside the station, the atmosphere was unrecognizable. The walls, that had protected misconduct for so long, crumbled under scrutiny. Supervisors were replaced. Files long buried were unsealed. Complaints once ignored were now evidence. Internal affairs was no longer a quiet corner. Office it became the most active unit in the department. The first wave of reforms came faster than anyone expected. The mayor, under pressure, announced mandatory independent storage of all body cam footage. Civilian oversight boards with real investigative power were formed. Their members chosen not by the department, but by community vote. Every officer would undergo quarterly bias and de-escalation training, designed and reviewed by external experts. And performance reviews now tied promotion not just to arrests or tickets but to conduct complaint history and community feedback. Maya stayed away from the spotlight. She didn't want to be the face of the movement. She wanted the movement to outgrow any one person. But she worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She advised the committees shaping policy. She met with city lawyers, with civic groups, with federal liaisons to ensure reforms had teeth. She helped draft new protocols for federal-local cooperation to prevent future abuses of power against agents or anyone else. One of the most powerful moments came when Maya returned to the station as a suspect, but as a partner in training. She stood before a room of officers, many of whom had seen the video, many of whom had questioned their own choices since. And she spoke plainly. I know most of you wear that badge with pride. I know most of you want to do what's right. But the silence of the good enables the wrong. The next time you see something, say something, do something. Because your silence costs lives. Your silence almost cost mine. The room was silent, but the message landed. Brad and Tom, meanwhile, faced the consequences they never saw coming. Both were indicted for abuse of authority and falsifying reports. Their names became cautionary tales in training modules and public debates. Gone were the grins, the bravado. What remained were two men forced to reckon with the damage they'd done not just to Maya, but to the trust in the badge they once wore. But the real victory wasn't in their downfall. It was in what rose after. The city began to heal, not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. Recruitment shifted. New officers came from more diverse backgrounds. Community policing programs were funded and expanded, not as PR stunts, but as meaningful bridges. The Line Initiative, inspired in part by Maya's ordeal, was launched, a partnership between federal, state, and local agencies to track, report, and prevent abuses of power nationwide. Grants supported cities willing to adopt the strictest standards. Maya declined the offer to lead it, choosing with real investigative power were formed, their members chosen not by the department, but by community vote. Every officer would undergo quarterly bias and de-escalation training, designed and reviewed by external experts, and performance reviews. Now tied promotion not just to arrests or tickets, but to conduct, complaint history, and community feedback. Maya stayed away from the spotlight. She didn't want to be the face of the movement. She wanted the movement to outgrow any one person. But she worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She advised the committees shaping policy. She met with city lawyers, with civic groups, with federal liaisons to ensure reforms had teeth. She helped draft new protocols for federal-local cooperation to prevent future abuses of power against agents or anyone else. One of the most powerful moments came when Maya returned to the station not as a suspect, but as a partner in training. She stood before a room of officers, many of whom had seen the video, many of whom had questioned their own choices since, and she spoke plainly. I know most of you wear that badge with pride. I know most of you want to do what's right. But the silence of the good enables the wrong. The next time you see something, say something, do something, because your silence costs lives. Your silence almost cost mine. The room was silent, but the message landed. Brad and Tom, meanwhile, faced the consequences they never saw coming. Both were indicted for abuse of authority and falsifying reports. Their names became cautionary tales in training modules and public debates. Gone were the grins, the bravado. What remained were two men forced to reckon with the damage they'd done not just to Maya, but to the trust in the badge they once wore. But the real victory wasn't in their downfall. It was in what rose after. The city began to heal not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. Recruitment shifted. New officers came from more diverse backgrounds. Community policing programs were funded and expanded, not as PR stunts, but as meaningful bridges. The Line Initiative, inspired in part by Maya's ordeal, was launched, a partnership between federal, state, and local agencies to track, report, and prevent abuses of power nationwide. Grants supported cities willing to adopt the strictest standards. Maya declined the offer to lead it, choosing instead to stay in her fieldwork, but she remained a key advisor, shaping its mission. And the public stayed vigilant. The energy that had poured into protests was channeled into watchdog groups, citizen review panels, and sustained civic engagement. People realized justice wasn't a moment hit, was a habit. In private, Maya allowed herself a quiet breath, not of relief because the work was far from over, but of resolve. What had begun as a bet by two men looking for sport had sparked something greater than they could have imagined. They'd tried to break her. Instead, they'd helped build a better future. And that was the accountability that mattered most. Brad Coleman sat alone. The apartment that once felt like a refuge, now a cage. The curtains were drawn against a city that no longer wanted to look at him. His phone was dead, not from battery, but from the weight of unanswered calls, blocked numbers, severed ties. The badge that once gave him power now felt like an anchor at the bottom of a sea of shame. The video played in his head on loop, not the one the world had seen, but the one he remembered through his own eyes. The smirk on his face as he made the bet, the way his hands tightened on Maya's arm, the sound of the cuffs, so satisfying in the moment, so damning in the echo. He had told himself for years that he was the good guy, that he was keeping the streets safe, that small abuses didn't matter if the job got done. Now all he saw was the truth. Tom Willis wasn't doing much better. His lawyer had advised him to stay quiet, to avoid the press, to prepare for court. But no legal strategy could silence the voice inside his own head, the one that kept replaying Maya's words. You bet on me. You built a lie because you thought no one would call you on it. And Maya, she returned to the work. Not to the same work because nothing would ever be quite the same, but to the mission that had always driven her. To protect, to serve, to build something better than what she'd endured. She didn't seek out the cameras. She didn't need to. The change she'd helped spark spoke louder than any speech. She'd walk through neighborhoods that once viewed law enforcement as enemy territory and see something new in people's eyes, not trust. Not yet, but possibility. A crack in the wall, a chance to build. She kept the cuffs from that night, tucked away in a drawer, not as a trophy, not as a reminder of pain, but as a promise. Never again. When asked, Maya said it simply. Justice isn't a verdict. It isn't an indictment. It isn't to officers losing their jobs. It's what we choose to build next. It's whether we let this be a moment or a movement. Justice is what we do after the cameras are gone. The city changed. Slowly. imperfectly, but truly. The policies passed. The oversight deepened. The culture began to shift, not everywhere, not overnight, but undeniably. And for every headline that faded, the work remained. And the audience, you, watching this story, hearing these words, you're part of it now. Because justice isn't handed down, it's built, day by day, choice by choice. So ask yourself, when you see the next Maya, when you witness the next abuse, when you stand at the edge of silence or action, what will you do? Because justice isn't finished, it's just begun.